Goal is to identify, thank you. Our goal is to identify and expose the political, economics, and cultural systems which have enabled white supremacy to flourish, to create new structures and policies which will ensure equity and inclusion for all. In our commitment to uncovering the blight of white supremacy on our humanity, we take responsibility to address it and eliminate it in all its forms through intentional action, starting with ourselves in our communities. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And I now turn to Connie to introduce our speaker for the evening.
Thank you, Joyce. I'm honored to introduce tonight's speaker. Erin Michelle Williams, Esquire, is an experienced and versatile attorney who works to champion the principles of equity, justice, and opportunity over civility or respectability. She's barred in New Jersey, New York, and the Southern District of New York, but has appeared in various jurisdictions around the country. She's an experienced civil rights litigator, social, racial, and reproductive justice movement lawyer, and proud criminal defense attorney. Erin is currently the chief advisor to the director of the New Jersey Division of Civil Rights. She's held various roles with the DCR and has led teams in a landmark mortgage redlining matter with the DOJ, published civil rights reports on issues including the spread of white supremacy and bias in the state, promulgated our nation's first Fair Chance in Housing Act, and much more. Currently, she also leads DCR's Home Appraisal Discrimination Initiative, the nation's first state-based home appraisal task force of its kind. In prior positions, Erin represented pregnant people around the nation who were charged with crimes or faced punishment related to their pregnancies, and served as a zealous trial attorney at the New Jersey Office of the Public Defender, where she was a trial strategy trainer and lead lawyer handling complex felony criminal cases. She's also served as an adjunct professor at the New Jersey Institute of Technology and Seton Hall Law School. Thank you so much for joining us, Erin.
Thank you so much, Connie. I want to first say Happy New Year to everyone. I apologize. You will be hearing me cough several times. I might even have to blow my nose. I'm sure many of you all know it's just that time of the year, and my husband is an educator, and so that means that every child that gets sick, I get sick. So I apologize for being a little bit under the weather, but I'm really excited to be here this evening. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Okay. Great, and I'm going to move you all over to the side. So hopefully you can see my screen. And I know I really love that I was able to join a little early and hear the mission statement of Not in Our Town and hear some discourse about what you all plan on talking about. And I want to just acknowledge that for some, myself included, remember that today is January 6th. And I recognize, obviously, that while my title is about home appraisal discrimination, the title, as I understand it for today, is related to white supremacy and race and racism. And certainly, what was it, 2 years or so ago? I can't even remember. But a few years ago, we saw on our nation's capital some serious demonstrations of at minimum, white supremacy. And so I just want to acknowledge that that is something many of us, I'm sure, are probably dealing with, grappling with, and I may not specifically discuss today, but I want to just open up that space. Only thing that I believe was not mentioned that is not on the screen also is that my preferred pronouns are she, her, and hers. So again, thank you all for the invitation to come tonight. I'm going to do my very best to keep this under 30 minutes. And if it's a little long, I apologize. Please let me know. And we actually have trainings on this very thing that go longer. And I will share links to that if you wish later on. So I want to first start by discussing and telling you all about the New Jersey Division of Civil Rights. I go into many spaces where people are aware of DCR and places I go where people are not aware of DCR. So I like to always start with discuss like what DCR does. And so the New Jersey Division of Civil Rights, known as DCR, is a state agency charged with enforcing New Jersey's civil rights laws, including the New Jersey Law Against Discrimination, known as the NJLAD, the New Jersey Family Leave Act, and the Fair Chance in Housing Act. known as the FCHA, and then the former NJFLA. The mission of DCR is to protect the people of New Jersey from discrimination and bias-based harassment in employment, housing, and places open to the public. And the LAD is one of the oldest and most comprehensive anti-discrimination laws in the country, prohibits discrimination and harassment based on actual or perceived race, religion, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, disability, and many other protected characteristics. The law applies in employment and housing and places open to the public. Places open to the public include, businesses, restaurants, schools, summer camps, medical providers, government agencies and offices, even jails and prisons are included in places open to the public. And I want to emphasize that we should be really proud that we are in a state where we have one of the oldest and most comprehensive anti-discrimination laws. In fact, it goes further than the federal law. And I always say that, but I think particularly in this political climate, it's important to recognize how important the state laws are and will be, especially over the next, frankly, probably several decades when it comes to civil rights work. Now, DCR has several bureaus that work to prevent, eliminate, and remedy individual and systemic discrimination and bias-based harassment. And two broad ways we work towards fulfilling our mission to eliminate and prevent discrimination in New Jersey is through our reactive work and our proactive work. Our reactive work, we're mandated to take complaints from individuals who are alleging discrimination and harassment, investigate to determine if there is indeed a violation of the LAD or FLA or FCHA, and determine if we are able to remediate violations in many ways. And that's achieved through different units. And then we have our proactive work. So where instead of responding reactively to a complaint, instead we work to prevent discrimination and address more systemic issues that can't necessarily be addressed by individual complaints. So those are some of the ways that we enforce our laws. Excuse me. Now, I want to lay a little groundwork around our housing related issues. Again, I mentioned that we enforce the laws that apply in employment and places open to the public, but this presentation is mostly focused on housing. And so I want to start obviously at the federal level that in 2021, the Biden administration launched an interagency task force led by HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, to launch a property appraisal and valuation equity initiative known as PAVE, which stands for Plan to Advance Property Appraisal and Valuation Equity. And since taking office in 2022, the New Jersey Attorney General, the present New Jersey Attorney General, Matthew Placken, has also prioritized achieving fair housing around our state. And DCR has been working for nearly 8 decades, over 8 decades, to address bias and discrimination in housing through the work that I described before. And as mentioned in my bio, some of that work includes a historic $20 million community settlement against Trident Mortgage for their redlining practices in the Trenton area, working with home buying and rental platforms like Zillow Inc. to address source of lawful income discrimination, which is pretty rampant, unfortunately, in our state, and even promulgating the nation's first Fair Chance in Housing Act, which significantly limits how housing providers can consider a potential tenant's criminal history during the tenant application process. And that just names a few of the things that we're doing. And so what you see on our screen on the right side is some of the work that we have done, just me grabbing a couple of headlines related to the work we have done in New Jersey, and then also some of the work that is being done, well, although let's be honest, in the next few days won't be done, but has been done related to appraisals at the federal level. I want to also begin the presentation with some foundational information on how discrimination and appraisals impact us. I truly could spend another at least 30 to 45 minutes talking about housing discrimination in general. But since this is a new initiative and really important to discussing the ways in which generational wealth, particularly in Black and Brown neighborhoods, are taken away, we're only focusing on appraisals. So first, I don't like to assume anything. And so I want to start with defining that an appraisal is an estimate of the value of property, such as a home. And an appraisal is often used to establish the value of property for the purpose of obtaining a home loan or other types of financing, like refinancing. An appraisal should be unbiased and independent. It should be. It is not always. And appraisals are important because they determine how much a property is worth and affects how much people make when they sell their property, how much a person pays when purchasing a home, and how much equity a person or family can access during a refinance. Unfortunately, the appraisal process is not applied pretty regularly, equally, or equitably for all people. And as I'm sure many of you all know here, the housing industry has been historically one of the premier places where systemic racial inequalities can be found. On the screen, I share a few quotes from a few decades. These aren't even all the quotes, but from decades worth of appraisal manuals, highlighting the ways that the race, color, religion, and national origin of many people have been used to undervalue neighborhoods, homes, and ultimately redline communities. And so on the left, you will see what the home appraisal process should include, which that appraisers come to inspect a home or a property, and they should be considering objectively overall condition of the house, square footage and lot size, built-ins and additions, surrounding amenities, um, the location, those features of the home. Unfortunately, the appraisal process can be very, very subjective. And so while these are some of the factors that should be considered, there's a lot of space for a person's biases to come in. And not only do those biases come in based upon what a person is just dealing with or what their experiences are as an individual, but also there have been over decades specific portions of appraisal manuals that have have said the following. So in 1946, and sometimes I will just call to people, not calling anyone's name, but just wonder to yourself, like, were you born in 1946? Were you alive in 1946? Do you know people who were alive in 1946? Because I certainly do. And thinking about the fact that even in 1946, the appraising manual stated the following as a guidance for their appraisers, that those nationalities and races having the most favorable influence, and this was for Chicago, come first in the list, and those exerting detrimental effects come last. And they list out in the following allegedly ascending to descending order when assessing like how you would appraise a home. First would be English, Germans, Scotch, Irish, and Scandinavians. Second, North Italians. Third, Bohemians or Czechs. Fourth, Poles or Polish. Fifth, Lithuanians. Sixth, Greeks. Seventh, Russian, Jews of lower class. Eighth, South Italians. Ninth, Negroes, and 10, Mexican. And so in this guide and in that manual, that is how they're advising the appraisers to assess how to evaluate a home, not based upon, just to juxtapose the left-hand side, just the home itself, but literally who is occupying the home. In 1973, again, I call upon people to think about whether or not you were alive in 1973, whether you know people who are still working who may have been born in 1973 or what have you, because sometimes I think some of these dates can seem far away, but they are not. In 1973, the American Institute of Real Estate Appraisers course materials stated the following: as a general rule, homogeneity of I'm from Georgia, so sometimes my tongue is a little heavy. Of the population contributes to stability of real estate values. Information on the percentage of native-born whites, foreign whites, and non-white population is important, and the changes in this composition have a significance. As a general rule, minority groups are found at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder, and problems associated with minority group segments of the population can hinder community growth. So this is up until 1973, and these again are just a few examples of where there has been specific guidance on how appraisers should be assessing minority groups when considering the value of homes. And again, because I'm giving you an abbreviated a presentation, I will also mention, because I usually sometimes can spend an entire slide discussing the racial and gender demographics of the appraisal industry today, but I don't want to miss that. So I'm going to mention now, today, and has historically been true. 95 or 7% of appraisers in our state and across the nation are typically cisgendered white men. And so it is not hard to understand or believe that even if these types of guidance or these types of instructions may not necessarily be included, there is still a pattern and perpetuation of this understanding that this is what we do. We don't only assess the condition of the house, the square footage, but we also assess who lives in a home and what that neighborhood is composed of demographically. Now, importantly and historically, homeownership is a significant wealth builder in America. For Black Americans, over 90% of wealth comes from home ownership through our home equity. Again, for Black Americans, over 90% of wealth comes from home ownership through access to home equity. A home appraisal is significant, therefore, for buyers and sellers alike. For a buyer, an appraisal below the contract price may mean that the buyer must increase their down payment. That increase in the buyer's out-of-pocket payment may cause the sale to fall through, potentially preventing a prospective buyer from purchasing a home at all, and thus the seller from even selling the home at that point. And for a seller, an appraisal below the contract price may force the seller to renegotiate the sale at a lower price, reducing their profit from the sale. An under appraisal can also harm a homeowner in a refinancing transaction, reducing equity in the home and increasing their interest rate. And naturally, all of this can affect the wealth of individuals, families, and entire communities. And when a home is sold at a lower price, that sale becomes a candidate for the next appraiser to choose as a comparable sale for the next appraisal in the community, carrying the impact of the lower value forward. And over time, a systemic pattern of undervaluation can reduce property values across the community and therefore reduce the wealth of the residents who live in that community. And research demonstrates that the burden of undervaluation falls disproportionately on buyers and sellers of color, leading to persistent racial disparities in rates of home ownership and in wealth. And a recent study found that homes in majority Black and majority Latinx neighborhoods are significantly more likely to be appraised below the contract price than homes in predominantly white neighborhoods. And Black and Latinx or Latino applicants receive appraisal values lower than contract price more often than white applicants. And this is called what we call an appraisal gap. Now, there are many reasons for the discrimination, but one basis is the lack of diversity in the industry, as I discussed before. So again, nationally, 90% of appraisers are white and male, and less than 1% are Black, and even less identify as female, irrespective of what their racial identity is. And in New Jersey, based upon 2023 statistics, there are a total of 2,310 registered appraisers. And so 90%, we would assume 90% of those appraisers are also white and male. And again, what I just explained to you is what we call compounding effects of undervaluations, where the market value of a home may start off, $1 million. And if a home is undervalued by $300,000, which is not uncommon, I'm telling you that, then that obviously the value of that home shrinks, which is what you see in the second house. And then you can see that an undervaluation of the home affects the list price and appraised values for others in that community. Because once this is undervalued, appraisers will be able to pull from this particular home and say that these homes are only valued or able to be valued at this level. So over time, homeowners in the neighborhood experience less gain of home equity and wealth when they sell or refinance their home. And so we're talking about people being able to pull for their home for something as celebratory as a wedding. And I say that very specifically because a year and a half ago, my husband was selling his home. He received a $50,000 undervaluation, under appraisal, and we were planning for our wedding. And like that money could have paid for our wedding. I know people who have experienced under appraisals, and they were trying to pull equity from their home to pay for their child's college education. These are actual numbers that really, truly impact people's lives. I have a QR code up because oftentimes we think like, how does this impact New Jersey? And so if you wish to, and I'm going to share a lot of the documents I'm about to go over with you all separately, but if you wish to pull up any of the graphics or anything right now, if you use your phone right now, you can scan that QR code and it will take you to our home appraisal discrimination landing page, which will not only have these graphics, which we encourage you to share on social media or with others, but also some fact sheets, some press releases, and some more information. But again, how does this impact New Jersey? And so briefly, I will share with you that Black New Jerseyans' total wealth through home ownership is only 5.9% of the state's total $860 billion in wealth through home ownership and primary residences. And discrimination in home appraisals often limits the value of Black-owned homes in racially diverse and predominantly white neighborhoods. In New Jersey, homes are an estimated 11.6 more likely to appraise below the contract price if they are in neighborhoods with a Black population more than 50%. In New Jersey, the average devaluation of homes in majority Black neighborhoods is negative 21%, approximately $88,912. Lower home values for Black homeowners result in less accumulated wealth through home ownership than white owners' experiences. Again, if you scan this QR code, it'll take you to towards the bottom of the page where you will see some of these graphics and be able to share them and post them. Now, in January of 2024, I can't even believe it's been an entire year, we at DCR, in collaboration with the New Jersey Division of Consumer Affairs, known as DCA, launched an initiative to combat residential appraisal discrimination, with a particular focus on race-based discrimination occurring in the industry. And part of the reason why we decided to focus on race-based discrimination, I assume that this group, but again, I said I don't like to assume, that we know in our state, while we have a lot of protections, we have really great laws, we also have some of, if not the largest, racial disparities when it comes to wealth. And so, and frankly, many other things, including like maternal health outcomes, and a lot of that stems from a stability in one's home and economy. And so that's why we particularly focus on race-based discrimination in appraisals and in housing. I lead this task force on behalf of the Division of Civil Rights, and I'm proud to say that this initiative has been lauded by the DOJ and other national housing leaders as the first and most comprehensive initiative by a state to address home appraisal discrimination. And the coordinated effort includes several key actions, and I'm going to go through them briefly with you. First, like I just mentioned, we have an enforcement task force, which is an internal task force, small but mighty, focused on enforcing the LAD, which prohibits discrimination. And we've launched several investigations into alleged home appraisal discrimination. Unfortunately, I cannot discuss our various targets, but we are working diligently to identify lenders, appraisal management companies, and appraisers who are alleged to have routinely or repeatedly engaged in some form of appraisal discrimination. We've also, excuse me, and for those who joined a little late, I'm a little sick, but I'm here. And I'm doing my best to not cough in your ear. So let me take a little sip of water. We've also launched legal guidance, which explains the obligations of appraisers, appraisal management companies, and I'll discuss this a little bit more, and lenders, noting that they all may be found liable under the LAD. And appraisal industry professionals who violate the LAD or any other state or federal civil rights laws are also committed to may also be found to have committed professional misconduct and may be subject to discipline by the New Jersey State Real Estate Appraiser Board, who we are working in partnership with. There is also going to be a state real estate appraiser board equity subcommittee tasked to reduce barriers to entering the appraisal profession and diversifying the profession. If you're interested in that, you can email me and I can pass on your information to the people who are handling that at DCA. And then we're doing a lot of public education and outreach, like what you're seeing me do now, which includes virtual trainings, presentations, different documents that we're putting forth so people are aware of the issue, because the first stage is awareness. We also have anti-bias training. We offer implicit bias trainings for appraisers and to members of the appraiser board, and we have a couple of those trainings which are over an hour and a half long listed on our website. If you scan the prior QR code, which will show up again at the end, you can scroll down and see those trainings that are recorded. And as I mentioned, DCR and the appraiser board have established a process to share appraisal discrimination complaints so that the claims can be addressed by both divisions. A lot of times we can feel when we're complaining to state agencies that things just go into the ether. And that was one thing we really wanted to ensure would not happen. So if you are experiencing discrimination or just think that you are, right? Because a lot of times we're not always sure, and you don't have to be confident. That is for us to assess. So if there's suspicion of feeling that there might be some appraisal discrimination, you can reach out to DCR. You can also reach out to the Division of Consumer Affairs, which is DCA, and let us know. And we work together to some extent to ensure that we're responding to those concerns. Now, I know that since members of Not in Our Town Princeton are champions of racial and social justice, I want to spend just a little time explaining some of the entities that can be held liable under the LAD for home appraisal discrimination, and then discuss some ways to spot discrimination, and finally how to report potential bias and discrimination. I promise you, I'm not going to give you a legal lecture. So the LAD prohibits discrimination, like I mentioned, by home appraisers. And the LAD's broad language also prohibits discrimination, not just by the appraisers who conduct the appraisal, but also, and this is why New Jersey can be so impactful and leaders on this, and we are being leaders, not only by the appraisers, but also by the appraisal management companies and the mortgage lenders. So these entities include lenders such as banks and non-bank mortgage lenders, and the appraisal management companies known as the AMCs, which in some circumstances connect the appraisers to the lenders. The AMCs typically function where when a mortgage lender is looking for an appraiser, they'll send out like a RFP. The AMCs sometimes will collect that and they'll send them to the appraisers. And then the appraisers will send back how much money they want for a particular project. And the AMCs will often manage a lot of that. And so people are mostly focused on just the appraisers. Here in New Jersey, we are interested in the whole spectrum of the people involved. Because if you have no knowledge of or should have knowledge that an appraiser has done something discriminatory, whether that is using certain language, whether that they have a typical trend of undervaluing certain properties in certain places, whether there are many different things that we'll go over in a second when we're talking about potential flags, and you as an AMC have approved that report or continue to work with that appraiser, or you as a lender have ignored the language that might be used or ignored the algorithms that you should have in place that are flagging for you that this appraiser is doing wrong, everyone involved can potentially be found liable for appraisal discrimination. Excuse me. So this is not a limited list, and it may also include realtors and brokers. We are gathering information, and maybe Not in Your Town may have heard some things they may want to share with us, but sometimes there are realtors, brokers, or other people or other entities involved in furthering or advancing appraisal discrimination. We have not found a case where it includes the homeowner or seller, because typically they are not aware of each other's races, because they typically do not know each other's race, but anything is possible. We're open to hearing about that. So let me give you some other important ways to think about this issue. So there's disparate treatment and disparate impact. So the LAD prohibits conduct that is intended to treat people differently based on their membership in a protected class. That protected class can include race, religion, disability, gender identity, frankly, even veteran status. We have a long list in New Jersey that is broader than the federal level. And the LAD prohibits conduct that is intended to treat people differently, and that is called disparate treatment. Now, disparate treatment can occur when an entity or person, like an appraiser or an AMC or a lender, acts in a way or has a policy intended to treat an individual or community differently because of their characteristic. For example, an appraiser may have a policy or practice that he will shave off $1,000 for every square foot in homes located in New Jersey, because he doesn't really believe prospective buyers value homes in Black neighborhoods as much. that can be discrimination, and the appraiser and anyone who relies upon the appraisal report may be held liable. Again, an example is where an appraiser has a policy or practice where they just always, if you're in Newark, shaves off $1,000 when assessing that particular property. That would be disparate treatment because it's based upon the fact that it's in Newark, and in general, he believes that Black neighborhoods are not as valuable. Then there's disparate impact. The LAD prohibits policies and practices that disproportionately affect people in a protected class, even when the policies and practices are neutral on their face and are not necessarily intended to discriminate. In those cases, the LAD prohibits appraisers, lenders, and AMCs from maintaining a policy or practice that has an unlawful disparate impact. So even if the policy or practice is neutral in its face, as in it doesn't mention anything about Black or brown or people of a particular demographic, or they don't say that that's the reason why, if it is causing an impact on communities or people of a protected characteristic, and the entity knows or should know because of the trend, this impact, that can be found liable for discrimination. So for example, let's say a bank has a neutral practice that they only advertise their lending services for mortgages or refinances in the areas outside of the city of Trenton. They intentionally do not advertise in Trenton. While the policy is neutral, we just don't advertise in Trenton. Its impact includes excluding people from Trenton from knowing about their financial services, which leads to a disparate impact of them not having full access to the services other people, typically non-Black or brown, may have access to. I'll give another example. An AMC, and an AMC is not the movie theater, an AMC is the appraisal management company. Let's say there's an appraisal management company located in Pittstown, New Jersey, demographically largely white. And that AMC provides services to residents all around the state. They operate all around New Jersey. And they have a neutral policy that it will only hire appraisers who live in Pittstown. And they know or should know that this restricts appraisers of other racial backgrounds from working with them. They could be found liable for discrimination if there is no necessary and legitimate purpose for the policy. So there are some defenses to this. They could potentially say, well, there's a reason why. But if you're operating around the entire state, what is the reason why you're exclusively hiring in one particular town that largely is demographically white? So these are some I'm going through a little bit with you, some of the legal theories, mostly because I know doing many of these presentations, people, myself included at times, will feel like, I don't know if it's discrimination. I don't know if it's discrimination. I don't know, and you don't oftentimes, because when you're selling your home, when you're in a doctor's office, a lot of things are very individual, and it's very hard to compare how someone else is being treated. And I like to flag that it's not only about the individual treatment, but it's also about the long-term potential impact. And that is the difference between disparate treatment and disparate impact. So I want you all to think about that as you're considering whatever your discussions will be, and how, frankly, my call to action for you all, which is to share this information. I'm not going to go through, because I can't remember exactly what time we were at, but I want to just explain briefly that when, and I will in a moment, ask people to ensure that you are advising people to report, that it's not going to just individually go into a vacuum, that DCR is uniquely positioned to work to ensure that there will be possible remedies for people who are victims. And some of those remedies include monetary damages, some of them include restitution, specific performance. So for example, if someone is discriminated against due to their gender identity, DCR could require a lender to accept their application. We can require new policies. So we could require a policy to use a patient, and I'm just giving some random examples, not only specific to appraisals, but we could require a policy to use a patient's chosen name and pronouns on medical documents. We can require training on the LAD and implicit bias, and it can be annual training for many, many years, and they might have to demonstrate to us who is actually, participating in those trainings. We also monitor respondents' conduct to ensure that it's improved through routine meetings and correspondences and reports. we often require respondents to report on their actions to us. So, for example, requiring a facility to provide us with notice of any negative comments, surveys, or feedback that they've received related to, let's say, race discrimination and how they responded to it. And we get to assess whether or not we think that was relevant or not. And a lot of that is issued through our settlements that we might come to with individual entities, or things that sometimes when we litigate. And so there are also obviously monetary damages that potentially can come and be paid through. And there are also equitable remedies like requiring participation in a task force, creating a fund for victims to receive compensation, which is what we did in Trenton, and mortgage redlining, and much, much more. Or using an actual example, we've been able to require a Fortune 500 company to institute large scholarship funds to increase opportunities for employment in the accounting and finance industry for women and other populations underrepresented in the industry when they were engaging in gender discrimination. So there's actual work that can be done. It takes, unfortunately, a long time at times, but there's actual things that can be done for people who report and potentially become a part of a class, or potentially part of the center of an investigation for us. Now, how do I or you report appraisal discrimination? First, it's important to know that the very first step that we encourage is to file an ROV. An ROV is a request, a reconsideration of value. So if you believe that you have received an unfair, inaccurate, or discriminatory home appraisal, any of those things, it could just be you think it's unfair. It could just be inaccurate. I realized I must have accidentally skipped some signs of how to identify appraisal discrimination. I apologize. I will send a document where we have some of that listed, and some of that includes noticing that there are a lot of errors. And when there often are errors, maybe there won't be specific language that says your race or gender or what have you. But if there are a lot of errors, for example, they did not include your rental income in it, or they shortchanged you on the square footage. If there are a lot of errors, that could possibly be discrimination, because it can slowly start to devalue your home that way. But either way, if you believe you have received an unfair, inaccurate, or discriminatory home appraisal, you also have the option of requesting an ROV from your lender. A home buyer or homeowner can request that their lender or financial institution reconsider an appraisal the consumer believes is accurate, and ask for the appraiser to reassess the value of the home. This is not done through DCR. This is not done through DCA. This is something that you're already engaging when you're engaging through the process. And I point that out as the first line of defense, because ultimately, when you get to, as I will discuss in the next two steps, once you are reporting to DCR or DCA, we're going to potentially do an investigation. And unfortunately, investigations take time. Your first step should be, I don't believe this is correct. So I'm going to push back and say, I want the appraiser to go back and reassess the value of the home. And that, again, is work through the process of who the individual lender is. And so if you're considering refinancing a home, or selling or purchasing a home, you should consider, what are my lender's ROV policies? Because unfortunately, the appraisal industry is highly under-regulated, and a lot of lenders don't have policies at all, or very vague policies. So you should know from the outset, what are the policies related to reconsidering the value. And that is the very first step you should take, is because that usually should only take a few days for the appraiser to receive the request, to potentially go back out and possibly reassess. And in many circumstances, the appraiser will reassess at a higher level. So please know that that should be the first step. Now, if you do that and they still deny you, or frankly, even if you still believe that what came back after the ROV, or even if you don't file an ROV, you can come to and report to DCR or to DCA. So you can report appraisal discrimination to us through appraisal@njcivilrights.gov or 1-833-NJ-DCR for you. We also have a relay service. And then you can also report to DCA. We share DCA shares their complaints to us. And if you believe there's any type of professional misconduct by an appraiser, you can go to DCA's website or call them, and you can also come to them and let them know. And misconduct can look like, we've talked to people who've said, while their appraisal has come in where they believe it could have come in, that the appraiser came in, was very rude, they refused to shake hands, they make comments about their statutes in their homes, they make different levels of comments that seem to be very judgmental. That could be considered professional misconduct, and you can report that to DCA. And we've been requesting that, folks who we provide this presentation to disperse our materials. Again, you can use the QR code here to be taken to our landing page. Share with your network, post information on your website, spread the word about how to report. I've been doing lunch and learns, community presentations. We're open to doing complaint drives and webinars, newsletters and conferences. I've done some of those both on the legal end and on the non-legal end, to really get the word out, about this particular issue. I'm going to end here. I think this is my last slide. It is, but I'm gonna keep it right here, just in case anybody wants to take a screenshot of it. Thank you. I don't know if there's any questions. I don't know if you break out from here, Connie.
Thank you so much, Erin, for your illuminating and stimulating talk. And thank you for the amazing work that you do in our community. I think we'll be transitioning to our small group discussions. Is that correct, Mickey? One second, Janie. We have a few things to tell you beforehand. Thank you so much for your talk. We do save some time for the small group discussions. There are several community agreements that we ask people to take into consideration during the conversations in the breakout rooms. And please note that there'll be a facilitator in each room to help you with this. Please listen to each other respectfully so that each person has an opportunity to be heard. Please step up, step back, so people are encouraged to overcome their reluctance to talk. Take care not to dominate the conversation. Allow everyone to have equal airtime. Be careful not to interrupt when someone else is speaking. Please agree to respect one another's privacy by keeping this discussion and people's names and identities confidential. We ask that you embrace the concept that whatever is said or shared in this room stays in this room. Please speak from your own personal experience to avoid making generalizations. White people may feel uncomfortable when a person of color shares a hard truth. They should also understand that sharing these truths can be painful or even traumatic for the person of color. And now we'll be going into the discussion questions. And thanks very much. Again, Erin, you did a fantastic job.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Again, I unfortunately was not able to show with you, but I'm going to share it in the chat, a document that helps discuss like some potential signs of discrimination, because I'm sure that'll come up in conversation. So I'll do that in the chat in one moment. But thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you very much.